Before the invention of sandpaper, man only had inefficient means of smoothing boards.
Welcome back to the shop. One of the things I suggest that new woodworkers do is make projects that they can use in their shop. It's a good way to build your skills, and if they don't come out perfect, you're really the only one going to be using and seeing them. But they're a great way to develop your skills, plus help out around the shop. One of the first projects I ever did was these sanding blocks. I got them out of some magazine. I don't remember which magazine. There are different versions of them all over the place. It might have been a wood magazine or Shop Notes or something. But I'm going to make my own version. I've had these now for quite some time.
And their construction is pretty simple. Just two pieces of wood sandwiched together with a bolt and a wing nut, trapping the sandpaper between them. Let's take apart the original to get a closer look. These two lips help grab and hold the sandpaper. The washer helps distribute the clamping force. The hole in the top goes all the way through. I cut an inlay to hide the epoxied bolt. I'm going to use scrap wood, but you can build these using hardwood from the home center. I used walnut for the top and sides, and the oak for the majority of the block. The walnut is just aesthetics. You can make the whole thing out of the same hardwood. Let's get started. First, I'm going to rip the sides on the table saw. I don't cut all the way through the piece. The second cut separates the two pieces, while still giving a good reference surface against the fence. The two pieces are not the same thickness, so I'm going to run them through my planer. You could omit this step, or you could just cut the pieces correctly in the first place, unlike me. Time to glue it up. I glued the two sides to the bottom. I'm trying to clean up most of the squeeze out now when it's easier. Now to glue the two top pieces together. I'm going to get two sanding blocks out of this scrap. You can make as many as you need. Clamp it all up and wait for it to dry. You can either sand or plane the bottom flat. I cut the pieces to rough length. I trimmed the sides flush at the table saw. Cut the tops to length. The bottoms are cut to a slightly longer length, about 1/8 of an inch. I have two different sizes. The smaller is designed to fit a 1/4 sheet of sandpaper, like the originals. The larger is because I wanted a longer block. So there. I'm going to mark out the center of the block to know where to drill the holes. Mark the bottom block the same way. When I made the first set, I didn't have a drill press. I just used a cordless drill and a Forstner bit. I bought a set of Forstner bits to do the original project. It was a worthwhile addition to the shop. I use them all the time, and they weren't tremendously expensive. I used a regular twist bit for the holes for the shank of the bolt. I used a smaller Forstner bit for the bottom. This is for the head of the bolt. I needed to grind the head of the bolt down to allow room for the inlay. I'm going to use this marking knife to mark an area to chisel out a recess for the inlay. This marking knife was not expensive. It cost about $8 at Rockler. I paid less for it 10 years ago, and I use it all the time. I'm going to place the chisel right in the knife line made by the marking knife. You can't do that with a pencil. I glued the broken pieces back together. I should have done this in the first place. I will start to chisel out the recess. I have two sets of chisels. The first set I got was a Stanley FatMax, bought from the home center. They are inexpensive, around $50. These I have no problem wailing on with a mallet. The second set of chisels I bought for around $150. They're a set of 5 2 cherries chisels. I only pair with these chisels. I only do more finesse work and never hit on them with a mallet. I'm holding the bolt in place for gluing using some spacers and a wing nut. This will help hold the bolt tight as well as keep it straight as possible. The same for the second sanding block. I'm going to hold the bolt in place with epoxy. I'm going to do two versions of the blocks, one with an inlay and one without. This one is without the inlay. I will fill it entirely with epoxy so it's proud of the surface of the block. On the one with the inlay, I will just epoxy the bolt in place so it doesn't spin and set it aside to cure. I'm going to go ahead and epoxy in the inlay. As you'll see later, this didn't go as well as it did on the original blocks. On the block without the inlay, I only epoxied the bolt in place. I will trim the epoxy flat with a chisel. I'm going to round over the tops with a round over bit. I did this in 3 passes. I'll raise the bit for the second pass. I'm holding the piece in my wooden screw clamp to make it safer to hold. I didn't have a router insert that could accommodate this large bit. I have since bought one, but this wooden screw clamp gives me good contact with the table. I'm using a rasp to smooth the corners even more. This will make the block more comfortable in the hand. The rasp makes quick work of filing these corners down. I switched to a file to make the rough cuts from the rasp smoother. When I did this project originally, I only used a file and sandpaper because it's all I had. You could just use sandpaper if it's all you have. I'm using this old shirt to help give a soft padded surface to help round over the edges even more. I'm going to chisel down the inlay to get closer to the surface. Now that the chisel got close, I will bring it down flush with a hand plane. And here's the mess up. I blew through the inlay to the epoxy below. I should have recessed the bolt deeper. I then filled it with epoxy and chiseled it flush. And here's what it should look like. I put on several coats of a wipe-on poly. This is one of the easiest finishes to use. I just dilute some off-the-shelf Minwax polyurethane with some mineral spirits and just wipe it on with a paper towel. I use it all the time to give some protection to shop projects. The sandpaper goes on them pretty easy. You just sandwich it between the two pieces and clamp it down. And here they are finished. They're an excellent project to do when starting out. Not only do you get some nice tools to use in your shop, but you can take some pride in building them yourself. I use these blocks all the time, and I think you will too. Thanks for coming to my shop.